So technology has changed the way that we interact with cities. We get around from place to place in an Uber, we stay at Airbnbs, or we rent out our apartment as Airbnbs. We look at, for Yelp reviews before deciding where we're going to eat. You have now a fairly long engagement with Yelp. Tell us how you got involved with Yelp.
As a graduate student, I had been working on the economics of information. And at the time, I became interested in empirical questions about the types of information people use and how they're using it. And I remember I had been working on a paper about the US News and World Report college rankings. And at the time, I remember thinking, this is interesting, but I felt like the field of economics hadn't yet noticed this proliferation of other types of information sources that were becoming available in the field. So when I looked around me, I saw platforms like Yelp. So when we think about Yelp, it allows anybody to leave a review. And they can leave a review by simply registering an email address, going online, giving a rating, and leaving some prose about a restaurant, a hair salon, or another type of local business. And it struck me that the way that people are making decisions is changing in the internet age. And I remember when I was chatting with people about this, there was some question about whether platforms like Yelp, these crowdsourced online review platforms, were going to really transform industries, or whether these were really niche products that were going to be limited in interest to kind of a set of students or people who are particularly foodies to make decisions. So I collected data from Yelp, kind of publicly available data off the platform, and I paired it with data that I gotten from the Washington State Department of Revenue to understand what the causal effect is of Yelp ratings on restaurant sales. And when I did that, I used a regression discontinuity approach where I exploited the fact that Yelp ratings are actually rounded to the nearest half star. So for example, you could look at a 3.24 star restaurant, and that's going to be rounded to 3 stars, and a 3.25 star restaurant, and that's rounded up to 3.5 stars. Once I had data in hand and I implemented this regression discontinuity estimate, I could see that a 1-star increase in a Yelp rating led to about a 5% increase in sales for an independent restaurant. But one of the things I noticed in the results is that this only existed for independent restaurants. It seemed like changes to Yelp ratings didn't affect chain restaurant sales at all. Thinking about this result, it sheds light on the way that people are making decisions in the digital age. When we think prior to platforms like Yelp, there are thousands of restaurants operating in a market like Seattle, in San Francisco, or New York. Certainly more than you could go to in a reasonable period of time, and more than a professional critic would be able to write about. So historically, we've relied on chain affiliation as another form of information you could get about a business. So think about McDonald's. Whether you're in New York or San Francisco,
it's the same product. You don't need to look it up on Yelp.
You know exactly what you're getting. Not so in the case of independent restaurants. You walk into a local burger place, it may be delicious, may be terrible, maybe, it may just not be your style. And what Yelp does is it provides new information about small businesses, especially local businesses, but considerably less information about a business like McDonald's that already has an established reputation and a standardized menu across locations.
In a sense, Yelp is really a friend of competition and entry, right? That in fact, in a world in which we just had to rely on chain brand names, right? It's very hard to establish that brand name as a newcomer. If I start and someone likes my product, they'll give me a bunch of good reviews, and that can help me grow, even if I'm a relatively small operation to begin with. And that's got to be good for cities.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think that when we look at the data on where these platforms have become popular, it's in cities that have lots of businesses and lots of customers that are able to leave reviews about these businesses. And in cities, what we've seen is that platforms like Yelp, but not just Yelp, TripAdvisor, Angie's List, and scores of other businesses have taken hold to leave reviews for nearly any product or service imaginable.
Give us an example about how Yelp is useful to policymakers.
So there have been about 20 different changes in the minimum wage in the Bay Area over the last 5 years. So we mapped Yelp data to look at which restaurants were open, which restaurants were closed. And we looked at changes over time. And what we saw is that a $1 increase in the minimum wage leads to an increase in exit rate for restaurants, but the impact of the minimum wage depends on the rating of the business. So essentially what we were able to see is that for 4.5 and 5-star restaurants on Yelp, there's basically no impact of the minimum wage on the probability that they're going to close. But for lower rated restaurants, we saw a large impact on the probability that they were closing.